Hey everybody, Jeff here with the Curse of Oak Island and Beyond live stream. And here we go. We've got another great guest appearance tonight with the author and historian James A. McQuiston. He has written several books about Oak Island and talking about the Knights Templar and all of that. And I tell you, we are going to have a lot of fun with Jim tonight. We're going to be talking about all of his stuff and his brand new book that's out now. And we're going to get started with that right now.
This is Robert Clotworthy, the narrator of The Curse of Oak Island, and I have a question for you. Could it be that you are listening to The Curse of Oak Island and Beyond live stream?
This is a top pocket find, mate, for sure.
All right, we are live. Hey, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming here tonight. And as you can see, we have our special guest tonight, James McQuiston. James, thank you for coming on tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. This is such a fun show to be on and a fun to watch, too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. I did want to say real quick that we had tonight scheduled to be my co-host was going to be Jack Campbell, and Jack had a medical procedure that was done last week, and he's having some complications. So he is not able to be here with us tonight. So prayers are out for Jack, that all goes well. We miss him, and he will be back. We'll get him back on here. But so, just wanted to let you know, Jack is a part of this show and always has been. And so hopefully everything will get taken care of, and he'll be back with us very, very soon. So prayers for Jack, and we'll see him very, very soon, hopefully coming up here. All right. So let's get started. Jim, you've written, and I go back and forth between Jim and James. I'm so used to calling you Jim. But you have written several books about Oak Island. And, I've got a couple of them right back here behind me that are fantastic. Oak Island and New Ross. And then also, I forgot the name of it, Oak Island Nights, that is back there. And another fantastic book. Now you have a new one that has just been released on Amazon just in the last week. And I wanted to ask you, we'll talk about is curse codes and secret societies. And what got you the inspiration to do another book about Oak Island?
Well, first I got to tell you that I just barely made it here because I was in the makeup trailer. I'm in my study where I've written all my books, and
Really?
my library up behind my head here. I got everybody's book in there. So just about every time I've written a book, first two books I didn't even plan on writing. The Oak Island team prompted me to write them because I'd written so many emails and we were afraid everything was going to get lost. But I always think that's the last one, then something comes along. And by the time I did Oak Island and New Ross, which was, I believe, the last time I was on your show, I was pretty sure I was done. It wears you out. I mean, writing a book and the research and the proofreading and getting proofs from the company and all that. So at the end of the 2021 season, I think it was a Matty Blake show, and they were sitting around a table, and Rick made the comment, when you ask the who, what, when, where, why, and how, I think James, above all others, really deals with that.
Mm-hmm.
Tell you what, James is not giving up. Well, he didn't know that I had already given up, but so then he sent me an email for Christmas. So he doesn't email much at all, but he sent me an email Christmas and thanked me for my work and stuff. Mm-hmm. And he made the comment, what we really need is an X that marks the spot. And so I kind of, after thinking about that for a couple of days, I thought, was that a challenge? A veiled challenge or whatever? And
probably.
Well, I'm not on the island every day. And if I just, the only records I would be able to access from 1795 when the money pit was found would be known records that have been in everybody else's books. There's 20 or 30 books about it.
Right. Yeah.
What would I add? I might be able to formulate it in a linear fashion better or something, but I wouldn't really add much. So then it just struck me, well, the ultimate X that marks the spot was the 90-foot stone, because it was right smack in the middle of the money pit, lying down, and it was down 90 foot, which we don't really know if that was the end of the pit or if that was halfway down the pit.
Right. Yep.
Regardless, that was an object that marked the middle of the pit. So I thought, well, what if I just look into that stone some more, and maybe there's something that we've missed through the years, So this is the first book that's actually talked very much about what happened after 1795, because almost everything was history leading up to my theory about the next baronet. So the first way I approached it was I just started looking for stories of other buried stones. And it was just unbelievable. But I found out that there was a phenomenon, an absolutely real phenomenon, where stones and or metal tablets, scratched or carved stones, were buried. And there's been 1,600 of them found, mostly in Rome, Greece, Rome, the Middle East, and the British Isles. Wow. 1,600 of them found.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And in fact, the very last one that was found was just found in 2019. And they just this March, just 2 months ago, finally got it translated. And it was done at a university with experts in language, all that. And it followed the pattern of these other stones that I was finding. And if you want to put up slide 1, it'll kind of help. This was found in Egypt. It's from 700 or 800 BC, somewhere in that area. And it was what they called a curse stone. And it cursed anybody who would try to take that land away from that pharaoh or whoever owned it. And that was found buried underground. And it's got carvings on it. If you zoom right up to the top, you'll see some characters, not that they match the 90-foot stone, but they're the same type of thing situation. So then I found out about the curse tablets. They call them curse tablets because they can be out of stone or metal. So actually slide 2 shows a one out of metal, scratched in metal. And this was from British Isles. This particular one was addressed to the goddess Minerva, and all the ones that were found in this well were all addressed to her. What I found that even though they call them a cursed tablet, they quite often start out with a supplication to some type of spiritual being.
Deity, yeah.
God, it can be, one said I conjure up holy beings and holy names.
Really?
They found that they just found in 2019, the first words were cursed, 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 cursed by God. And then the rest of the tale went on. So finding a God, the name of God, or the, assigned to a goddess or to holy beings, or whatever, was a common phenomenon too. So it's an absolute phenomenon that tablets were buried, and it's also an absolute phenomenon that many of them start out with a supplication to God or some holy being.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know yet where I was going to go with all this, but what I eventually found if you go to slide 3, this is the Voynich Code. And just to show you how hard it is to break a code, this has never been broken, and it's been around since the 1800s, and it's been studied hundreds of thousands of dollars in different universities. One man spent 3 years of his life trying to break it. They had a mammoth computer system try to break it. They can't break the code. I just got this off a screenshot. It was a show about it on History the other day. And so, I knew that it was an ominous task to try to break a code, but I had no idea what codex I was going to use at the time.
Right.
But I found a code, and if you flip to the next slide, this is the very last letter that Mary, Queen of Scots, wrote just before she was executed. She wrote it to her brother-in-law, who was the King of France at the time. And one thing unique about this letter is she just hand wrote it right out, but most of her letters had a code on them. And that code has, because it's always difficult to say the whole name, Mary, Queen of Scots, started calling that code the MQS code for Mary, Queen of Scots. So when they refer to the MQS code, or when I refer to it, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
What I found was that there's one of her code sheets. There was one of her code sheets online. And so I studied that, and I saw that there were some symbols that matched those on the 90-foot stone.
Really?
So I, was involved with several places in Scotland, particularly the Society of Antiquaries, but that gives me access to the Scottish National Museum and the Scottish National Records. So I'm emailing everybody and his brother and his sister, trying to find out who knows anything about Mary, Queen of Scots. And I actually emailed with some so-called experts on it, but nobody knew where the code was. This went on for 3 months, 3 months of waiting for emails and writing emails. And finally, somebody said, you're looking in the wrong place, because she was arrested in England. So the codes probably reside with the British Museum or the National Archives. I eventually found them at the National Archives. And they had 400 papers that she had written that when she was arrested, they confiscated. Now, I probably should explain for a minute who she was, but she was the daughter of James V of Scotland. And when he died, they spirited her out of Scotland because a Protestant movement was afoot, and she was Catholic. Her mother was French, so they took her to France. She ended up marrying the heir to the throne of France, and he only served for a few months, and then he died. So she was technically the Queen of France and the Queen of Scotland both,
At the
but
same time,
took over the throne. So she was, by law, she should have been the Queen of France, but she sort of got ousted. But she went back to Scotland, and she fought a lot of battles there, trying to keep the old way going. And eventually she escaped to England because Queen Elizabeth was her cousin, and she thought Queen Elizabeth would protect her.
Right.
So I don't think Mary, Queen of Scots had anything to do with Oak Island. So I don't want people to walk away from this thinking that. I look at her as a turning point between the Knights Templar era and the Freemasons era. and I have my reasons for thinking that.
I'm sorry, the Knights. You faded there for just a second. The Knights Templar era and the what?
In the Freemasons era.
Okay.
And because there were people connected on either side of her to those two organizations.
Right.
Her son was the first overall king of Scotland and England and Ireland, who was James I. He granted Nova Scotia to my chief suspect, Sir William Alexander. His son was Charles I. He knighted all the Knights Baronet up till his beheading. Her grandson, Charles II, knighted the last Knight Baronet to ever receive land in Nova Scotia, which was Thomas Temple. And her other grandson, James II, knighted Sir William Phipps. So all four of those descendants of hers were intimately involved with Nova Scotia. And so I thought, well, could that be the code? So eventually they got them scanned in. I said, can you go, have you ever gone through and pull out all code? No, we haven't. They've just been sitting back there. I said, well, could you do that? And they said, well, this is going to cost you. We don't work for free. And I said, well, I understand. I'll pay. So they pulled them out. There were 104 pieces of paper with codes on them. So I said, how can I get digital copies? And they said, well, we don't have them digitized, but you can pay us to digitize them. So I ended up with the first and world's first, and maybe I'm still that way, collection of her 104 code sheets.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Unless they sold them to somebody else after I bought them. But oh my gosh,
that's really cool.
4 sheets of paper that are mass confusion, and so some of them were numbered codes, so I knew they didn't have anything to do with the stone because there are no numbers on the stone.
Right.
And some of them were in French, which I can read a little bit of French, but I'm not that versed at it. And I just moved them aside. Some of them were just a small amount of code. Like she might have written an entire letter to somebody, but down in the corner, she put a little code. So I through all those because I had plenty to work with. I ended up with about 60 sheets that had code. They were actual codexes. So I started comparing, things from the 90-foot stone to her code. So if you go to the first thing I have to say is that a lot of people don't think the 90-foot stone even existed, and so I spent quite a bit of time in the beginning of the book providing what evidence there was. And one of the best pieces of evidence was a newspaper article from 1864 which said that the stone was still there to be viewed at John Smith's home. Now, you can imagine in a small area with maybe only one newspaper, and if they put that in there, people are going to go there, and if the stone's not there, they're going to be disappointed. So I don't think the newspaper would lie about that, and that's the same story that's been told right along. So, but I provided quite a bit of evidence, and one of the questions is, well, why wasn't there any write-up or any photographs? Well, there were no newspapers when it was found, number one, and photography, glass plate photography, didn't even come around until about 1850. So shortly before those news articles started appearing in those newspapers, and personal photography didn't come around till the end of like 1898 or something like that. So there wasn't just some simple way for these hundreds or thousands of people that went to John Smith's. They couldn't just take a photograph of it, In fact, he had a tea house there for people to have tea, because this is when the temperance movement was just starting. It wasn't prohibition, but so they kind of, gravitated to tea houses. What they were drinking, we don't know, but and I found out from Charles that there was another tea house on Oak Island out on Isaacs Point, that they know that for fact, but they haven't they haven't found the foundation or anything yet.
Wow. See, that's the first I've heard of that. That's interesting.
People were going out there and they were hanging out and drinking tea and talking about it and all that. So anyway, that was my first step to convince myself, is the stone real and all that. So if you do go to slide Oh, well, first of all, I wanted to tell you how difficult it was to get there. I got the call to go in July, or maybe I got it to call in June, but I was going to go up in July. Well, that was the height of the COVID restrictions. It was just crazy. I had to get a test in the US,
Yep.
cross the border, had to get a test in Canada. It took me an hour and a half to cross the border and another half hour to get the test. I got up to Oak Island and I had to get a third test. So by the time I got that third test, I knew I didn't have COVID.
Right.
I was just going to tell you how they created their bubble there. They, as you cross the causeway, there was a little station there, and a lady had a temperature gauge, one of those that they put at your forehead.
Right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And if you passed that little test, you would go right to a nurse's station. They had a building with a nurse in it, and you would get a genuine COVID test, and then you would sit and wait in the chair until they told you were okay.
Right.
Then you could go on up and mix with everybody, and you didn't need to wear masks or anything like that. So, and Laird, I think it was, that told me that they get tested twice a week. They did. They got tested twice a week.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah, so they all felt pretty safe. So once you were up there, you could walk around like the world was normal again. Yeah. But it wasn't normal because I could sense a lot of frustration, and I thought it was due to COVID and all the stress of all the steps you had to go through and all that. And so I was writing off as that. But after my first war room meeting, which was about my code, as everybody was leaving, Rick was standing on the back or on the front porch of the war room, and he told me about the Mi'kmaq back and how they got shut down. So I must have got there right after that happened.
Oh yeah,
because there was a pall over the entire island. He told me that Marty and Craig were frustrated enough to head back to Michigan, and he wasn't too happy himself. And I understand their frustration, and I'm sure they realize the same thing I do, that they've said on the show that there were artifacts,
right?
And I happen to know what some of them are, but they're not big. But it isn't just that pottery, but it's still small stuff.
Right.
But it could be there was a Mi'kmaq village there, or it could be that it was a trading post, because an explorer named Denny's was in Mahone Bay in the early 1630s, and he said that the Mi'kmaq would bring beaver pelts down from the lakes up around New Ross, and they would trade them in Mahone Bay. So that would be a very likely thing to have right on the end of the island, because that's like the closest island to those Gold River, particularly.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, where they could just pull their canoe up right there and do their trading and then leave again. Or the third option is that they just got washed in with the tide or with a storm. Mm-hmm. But the only way anybody's going to know is to do a genuine archaeological dig. And so obviously that has to be done, whether Oak Island did it or whether the Mi'kmaq have their own archaeologist or the province does it, whatever, that should be done. And I think everybody agrees that, as frustrating as it is, that should be done.
Yeah. And I remember Laird had actually said, we had him on the show not that long, just a few weeks ago. And Laird actually said that the pottery that they had shown on the TV show that he found in the southeast corner of the swamp, that piece of pottery that looked like a dirt clod to me, but he would know because he's an archaeologist. But he said that was the least of what they found, but that was what they chose to show on the TV show. But he said that was actually the least of what they had found. And it was, you're right. We got the sense of it when we saw it on TV. We got the sense of this foreboding over everyone about the whole situation. You were there firsthand to actually feel it from everybody in person. We could feel it watching it on the show, but now you're there and you get to witness that. And it really was. And I can understand their frustration, really.
Well, the other three items that Rick told me about were unmistakably native or Aboriginal, whatever word you want to use. And that they like First Nations.
First Nation people,
but there would be no question about them. But again, they were all smaller items. and they may have found much more than that, because he wasn't there to tell me everything, But I do have to tell you that after that meeting, and he was so filled with frustration, and I think that might have been what led to it. I don't know, but he asked me if I wanted to come over to his house for a while that night, and he said, "I'll pick you up because you'll never find it, because it is kind of hidden away. It's down a kind of a dirt road type situation. It's a beautiful home, but it's not something you'd even think to turn down that road." So he
Which
picked
is
me.
good. He needs to have something like that. Yep.
Oh yeah, and so he picked me up, and we went down there, and he showed me he literally had a pallet full of Dr. Pepper in the garage. I mean, I don't know how many, a few bottles anyway. But he told
Oh,
me it was
that's hilarious.
because of all the sugar. He said, I'm honestly trying to cut back, and he has a little wood workshop in there, and he does some woodworking, all related mostly to Oak Island. He promised me some type of a thing, but I haven't received it yet, but I know he's been busy. But so then we sat in his dining room, and oh my gosh, he just talked and talked, and I talked, and it went for 3 hours. And
Wow.
I learned so much about him and so much about the island that I was in awe of the fact that he would even tell me a lot of this stuff. But I was calm and everything, but I really don't. I was just like absorbing. I was like a sponge or something. I don't want to miss anything, so I'm not going to
Yeah.
think anything or say anything.
That's
But
how
anyway,
all of us would be if we got that opportunity. I can
yeah,
tell you.
it was literally like the mouse in the corner. I mean, it literally was. And
Yep.
so it was a wonderful conversation and everything. And so I returned the next day to do another war room on the bale seal, with the symbol on it. Where it was a bag seal or a bale
Yeah.
seal.
Yep.
And I showed him my research on some symbols, and as far as Masonic symbols or any kind. So, and the stipulation about going up there, this was the Canadian government stipulating this, is I couldn't leave anywhere. I couldn't be anywhere but at the hotel, which is the Oak Island Resort now. It used to be the Atlantica.
Right.
Or on the island. And I went for 4 days, flew up the first day, went to the island and visited them, came back the next morning for the war room meeting, and I had to go right back to the hotel. Well, I hung out as long as I could on the island. Of course, I'm not going to leave. And Charles Brown, he showed me these big rocks they're putting on the shoreline, and that's
Yeah.
I'd ever been to Isaac's Point, and he drove kind of right out on the point with a 4x4. And I said, "What are those rocks all for?" And he said, "We're trying to protect the island from the tides and the storms." And
Yeah, exactly.
then he took me and showed me he showed me Sam Ball's foundation, and I had seen it before from a distance because a Prometheus producer had taken me in, but you couldn't get any closer than 200 feet because I didn't have a permit. So we were just like looking through the woods at it and taking pictures, but we couldn't walk up to it. Well, this time he drove up to it. He said, "You still can't go. I can't let you out to walk over there, but you can see it a lot closer." And then he took me to where they found those artifacts, and they were rolling right along with a dig there, with a tent top over the top of it and finding stuff. But I think after they had to after the big hullabaloo and they had to let all the archaeologists go, I'm not sure what they did. I looked for that same tent and everything on the show, and I never saw it. So I don't know if they filled back in what they found, or they just left it in situ and said, "Well, if you guys want to take over, whatever." But they were, there was this that explained to me why there was this kind of a pall, because even with the other guys, I was sitting in the archive room with Doug and Steve and Scott and Laird, and they were making little jokes with each other like guys do, on each other, stuff like that. But they weren't particularly happy, you could tell. And so everybody was like, "What the heck?" We were
Yeah.
doing everything right, and we lost it. So anyway, so I didn't take any pictures there because there was just stuff is going on steadily. People can't even imagine. You got film crews everywhere, and you just don't have time to say, "Hey, can you pose for a picture?" or whatever. It doesn't
Right.
happen.
Yep.
But if you want to show number 5,
Yep.
he did take me up to the Money Pit Hill, and they had been drilling those core drillings that day. The table was still set up, but nobody was at the table. But Mike Tedford and another guy there were just getting ready to leave, and so I jumped out of the 4x4 and ran over and stood in front of their truck. And they stopped, and I went to Mike's side, and I said, "Hey, my wife's maiden name was Tedford. Can I get a photo with you?" And he got a big smile on me. He said, "Sure." So he got out of the
That's
truck,
cool.
and Charles actually took that picture of us right there.
That's neat.
So, and then later, was going to meet Carmen. Carmen and I were going to trade books because he helped me a lot with Oak Island and New Ross, and he has a book on oxen, which is a pretty nice book.
Yeah, the
So
use and care of oxen. Yep.
so we made this deal. We were going to trade, trade books. So he said, "Well, I'll meet you. I'll just meet you at the Atlantica," because I told him I can't go anywhere. So he said, "I'll just meet you there."
Right.
So I'm sitting in the foyer looking out the door, and here comes the pickup truck. And I thought, well, that might be Carmen. And then right behind it comes a blue vet.
That's Carmen.
That's sure. And honest to God, he pulled it around a little circle and parked and got out. And I got such a big kick out of that. So I was kind of kidding him about his cool car. So somebody took a 4x8 of just like a particle board, and they drew a very detailed, beautiful, beautiful drawing of Oak Island and the main features of it and all that. And it hangs there in the Oak Island Resort.
Yep.
So I
That's
thought, well, that's the perfect place to get our picture taken together. So we found somebody that was willing to take our picture. So those are the only 2 pictures I got from those 2 days I was there. But it was nice meeting those guys, meeting with them.
Yeah, we just had Carmen on last Saturday. He was great fun. He's been on the show a couple of times now, like yourself, and he has just been phenomenal. He's got such great stories and awesome things. That's so neat, and I can't wait to meet him in person. Hopefully this summer when I get up there, I get to meet him in person. So what a treat to meet both of those guys. And that's the thing about the guys from Choice Drilling. We see them on on TV when they're doing their work, but they don't really get the fanfare because they're always busy. Nobody's ever standing around talking
Yeah.
to them or anything like that. So what a treat to meet them. That's because they're just as important in all of this as everybody else, really.
And Mike's walked a lot of stuff over to the table.
Yep.
And actually even answered some questions here and there. And every time we see him, I'll say to my wife, "There's your cousin." So I about the Tedford name and told him how we have trouble finding anybody by that name, and basically everything we knew about it. So he got a big kick out of it.
Yep.
So for whatever reason, neither one of my war room presentations were shown, and that isn't unusual because my very first one, which was I was the last person to present in the old war room, wasn't shown, and I think 2 snippets from 2 actual war rooms have been shown, and snippets from 2 Zoom meetings have been shown. But overall, I've been on, I think, 12 episodes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I remember that one time you popped up and you had sent me a message and said, I didn't even know that I was going to be on tonight.
That was such an odd thing because it was just before we sold my mother's house, and all of my siblings had gone to my mom's house, and we were just, old time's sake or whatever. And I said, "Do you mind if I put Curse of Oak Island on?" And it came right up with my face right away. And I'm like, kidding me. I was on 4 times. That was last year. That was last season. I was on.
Yep.
They used us from that 4 different times. But so anyway, after I got back, maybe a month later, they called and asked if I would do a Zoom with Matty Blake because he wanted to feature Freemasons, and I'd been presenting stuff on Freemasons right from the very beginning. So if you go to 7, you'll see, that's me in the war room that day. And their method is a little bit different than yours, because I can't see. I can see them in the beginning, but once they start the filming and everything, I can't see them anymore. So I'm like talking to literally a blank screen,
Yeah. Oh, that'd be uncomfortable.
But
Yeah.
it was funny. The first time first time I was ever on a Zoom, this was with the crew in the war room.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't realize they left the mic on. It was a setup time, before the show. And so I'm hearing them talking about all this stuff that I wasn't supposed to know, what this thing they found, and they were going to cut it in half. And Rick was like, no, don't cut it. Wait till the archive stuff. And I'm like, I don't think I'm supposed to be hearing all of this. But anyway, I got a lot of the bugs out of my system. And by the time I did the one with Maddie, it went a lot smoother. And so I was on the next to the last Maddie Blake show there. And that was kind of cool too, because the first thing, if you remember that, it was from 2 weeks ago, the first thing that Rick did was tell Maddie he should talk to me. And he said, I can tell you what, or I'll tell you what, he's done his homework. And that, and also I have to tell you, you got to take the good moments as much as you can, because I've been at this I'm into my 7th year, and there's been a lot of long, lonely nights of writing, and my eyeballs burning and all that, but somebody says something nice, you really got to love it. So in all that stack, I had about an inch stack to get across the border of paperwork. And one thing in there was a letter of recommendation from Prometheus. And it said, as one of our key researchers with Oak Island Tours Incorporated, James A. McQuiston's on-screen appearances are critical to the production and unique theories that only he can provide. Wow. So someday is to put that in a frame and stick it on
That is definitely a treasure in itself right there. Yeah. That is really cool. That's an honor. It really is.
And it gave me more enthusiasm. I wanted to go up really bad, but I was very nervous about the COVID situation. And it gave me like that final push over to just go ahead and do this and let the chips fall where they may. So anyway, enough anecdotes, I guess, but we should probably get into the book and the code. Here's a copy of the book.
Yep, I don't have mine yet. It's on the way, but it's not here yet. I know quite a few people have jumped on and said that they have it and they're reading it and how great it is, but I have yet to get my copy.
I've had a lot of comments. I think I've had more people write me about this book than any other book, and they enjoy it. And so I wanted that doorway there. I wanted an old doorway, like you were going in the doorway of Curses, Codes, and Secret Societies. It turned out to be from a Jewish temple.
Oh, really?
The way Oak Island works, because I never even thought about. I mean, I was actually thinking, am I stealing Jewish art to talk about Scots? Turns out I got a whole chapter in here on the Jewish Kabbalism, however you say that, Kabbalism. And so I thought, when I got to that part of my research, I thought, well, maybe I was supposed to put that door on the front, after.
Yeah, things work out that way. And I want to say too, real quick, is that we have, for those of you that are interested, you can find it on Amazon, but we also have it linked in the description below. And I believe that Linda has also linked it on the YouTube side. But if you want to take a look and find the book, you can find it in the description. There is a link that will take you right to Amazon where you can get it.
Great. That's great. I've been asked about, why I published there. I was in printing all my life. I retired from it, and I can do all that background work. And I also went to a seminar on publishing, and they told me, you know what, you might as well just self-publish, because you're going to be doing all the work anyway. All they're going to do is take their share, but you're going to be going to the talks and setting up talks and everything else. And it's pretty simple to do. There's some cost involved, but it's it's simple to publish. It's difficult to write it, research it, lay out the pages. I have 2 really good proofreaders that don't give me any room at all to make a mistake. I mean, they are on my case, red marks all over everything all the
Would that be
time.
Linda Simpson? She might be. Yeah, no,
Well,
that's what she does for me. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, one's my own wife,
Just
Beth,
kidding,
who
Linda.
spent years in the print business too, and is very particular about detail. And then the other is my cousin Pat, who actually taught writing at the college level. So they both have different perspectives of what could or should be changed, because their backgrounds are different, But
Right.
and sometimes I get like, you can't change my words, that kind of a thing. But if it's a good idea, I use it. So,
That's right. Yep.
but as far as like Kindle, I tried 2 of my books through Kindle, and it just moved everything around so bad.
Yeah.
The picture that was going with the text was on a different page, stuff like that,
Mhm.
and it just made me so mad because I try so hard to make it the book readable and aesthetically nice and all that, in addition to the research,
Yep.
and see that happen. So I'm probably not going to ever do a Kindle book. I've also been asked about an audio book, and I know you have a great voice, so maybe someday you'll do an audio book of one of
Oh,
my.
that would be awesome. I would be honored. I would be honored to do that for you. I absolutely. And I did
But
want to mention too that you're right about the Kindle, and that was one of the questions that we had from Michelle was asking that question about that, and you just explained. I did get the Kindle version of Gretchen Cornwell's one of her books, and it was you're right. It got everything all mixed up. It was actually very difficult to get through the book
yeah, and I
because
wouldn't
it
want.
was and yeah, it takes away the experience of the pictures and how that all relates together. It really does, unfortunately.
I'm so specific or whatever that there is only one page in all of my 8 books that doesn't end with a sentence and a period. And
Mhm.
it was because it was in the middle of a quote and I couldn't figure out any way to do it. But I tried to make it easy to read. It's only slightly bigger than regular type, but I'm, up there in years and I don't like reading that teeny. They have really teeny type with big space between the lines. And I'm like, why didn't you just make the type better and make the space lower, But so I try to make it easy to read. And a lot of people, even as complex as they are, a lot of people read them in 1 or 2 days, 1 or 2 settings. They might read the book one night and the other half the next. And, but, so, maybe an audiobook's down the road. I mean, there won't be any photos,
Yeah, that's the bad part of that. Yep.
but it would satisfy some people that have trouble reading or they just like
Exactly.
audio, whatever. But anyway, so we should probably get into the code because there's a lot to talk about there, and I'm
Mhm.
not
Yes, there is.
I'm not going to hold too much back here today, just because I'm so anxious for people to know about this. So if you
Mhm.
go to slide 8,
All right, I'll bring that up right now. There we go.
so these are the 3, uh, I guess you'd call them written down translations of the code, and
Mhm.
the the code was first translated by what they're calling an Irish professor in uh, at Dalhousie University, but I believe he was a Huguenot myself. I'm not going to get into all of that, but and then this was given to Reverend Austin Kempton in 1909, and he sat on it for years. Now he graduated from one of the top universities in Nova Scotia, and he was a minister. So he probably wasn't going to risk his reputation by running around with some fake code or whatever. And he showed it to Frederick Blair in 1949, and he showed it to a man named Edward Snow, who wrote a lot of books about legends and stories up
Mhm.
the coast from like Cape Cod up to Nova Scotia, the Maritimes, I guess you'd call it. And he showed it to him, and he kind of transposed it a little bit, not the actual code, but just the way he laid it out. He put it into 4 lines rather than into the original 2 lines,
Right.
probably to fit in the book and be able to make the letters bigger or the symbols bigger. The one thing that those 2 have in common is that the very last symbol looks like a Roman numeral 2,
Mhm.
significant to my code.
Right.
Though the modern reproduction makes that symbol be a rectangle.
Yeah,
And
that's what you see on this one down here. Yeah,
the same code is in the line right up above it. That
right
symbol
here.
is twice. And that is actually the symbol for a person's name.
Oh, is it really? Wow.
And so just looking at these symbols right here, one thing that Mary Queen of Scots did, and I'll show you on the next slide, but we can leave it here for a minute.
Okay.
Zoom in on the middle one.
Okay.
So she used a thing called a null, which was a bogus symbol to confuse people. And so the most common symbol in that whole code right there is the thing that looks like kind of like a percent sign in a
Yeah,
way.
this one here.
And
Yeah, I noticed that.
so that was her number one null. She drew it just a little bit different, but on her codex sheets, she would list like 5 or 6 nulls, but that was like always the first one. So I thought, well, wouldn't that make sense that you would put it in enough times to really confuse people?
Mm-hmm.
And Daniel Ronstam, I think is his name, he presented in the war room, and he eliminated that from the code too, with the idea that it was some type of a punctuation mark.
Okay.
I eliminated it with the idea that it was this null that she put in there to confuse people.
Mm-hmm.
But even if it is meant to represent something, I approach the code in a different way than I think everybody else. I'm not sure, but I'm using symbols to represent entire words, not letters,
Right.
which is always done as a letter per letter. And that's the way her codex was. It was a symbol per word.
Right.
And
Makes
secondly,
sense.
assume it's not directions on how to dig up the money pit, because why would you ever put directions 90 foot down on how to dig the hole? You know, it just doesn't make any sense that they're down that far, because who would even know to dig in that spot to go find them to know what to do? So that always puzzled me.
Yep.
And finally, I'm using a well-known code, the MQS code, that matches every symbol. Matches every symbol but one, and that is the 3-dot triangle.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah, right here.
when I presented, I had nothing to show for that. It was used as a arithmetic symbol for the word therefore, like I had 3 apples, I found 3 more, therefore I have 6 apples. You know, it was that, and that started in the 1600s, but I couldn't figure out anything else about it. Well, what I found about it, which was absolutely amazing, is that is currently the code for Master Mason. So if you see a Masonic document online or anywhere you see one, and you see a gentleman's name and you see that code in front of it, that means he's a Master Mason. It took me a long time to find that out. When I finally did, I went to my friend Doc Hamels and I said, "Am I reading this right?" And he said, "Yeah, you are." And he said, I'll send you some things that are public domain online that'll show you that you're right. So he did. But my research was showing me that that was originally the symbol for the master of the stonemasons, not a master mason, but the master of
Wow.
the master of the stonemasons. At the time of my theory, his name's on that same stone. It's the plus sign that you see. Say the the last line.
Oh, down here. Okay.
Yeah, first symbol is the word support, and the second one is this gentleman's name. The third is, I believe it's meant to be God. The fourth is the symbol for Master Mason. The fifth is the word and the sixth is the son of the man that was the plus. So both father and son are on the stone, and they're on there twice because they're on the line right up above it.
Right here. Yes.
So now if you go to the very next slide, it'll help explain things. So you can see how she made her null, and you can see what the symbol is on the stone. And they're not absolutely identical, but you have to consider that she wrote that 450 years ago.
Right.
That somebody, if my theory is correct, carved it onto the stone, maybe 200 years later, somebody at the university wrote it down and gave it to Reverend Kempton, and then Edward Snow wrote it down. So it, like the old parlor game, you tell a secret, and by the time it gets around the circle, it's totally different. Well, this is
Exactly.
far off. So eliminating that from the code, this is what the end result is. And so if you go to the next slide,
Okay.
that would be 10, yeah, and zoom in there a little bit. If you go right up to the top, you'll see this is not the world's first reveal of this, because I talked about it on Doc Hamill's show, but Oh God, Send Angels, which is absolutely in keeping with all these, not all of them, but a lot of these curse tablets buried
Right.
around the world.
That's what you had said earlier. Yeah, exactly.
And so this handwriting, all this handwriting on here is hers. This was all written. She drew the symbols and she wrote the word 450 years ago. Well, the first word was cut and dried. It's O, and O is different than OH. O is like O Canada, O Christmas tree, O say can you see. It's a supplication to usually to God, but it can be something else too. Whereas OH is like, oh, I can't find my keys. It's,
Right. Yes.
words. She had no word for God or Jesus on any of her codex sheets. I checked them all. And but what's odd about that is she died for her religion. It was the fact that she would not give up her Catholic religion that she ended up getting beheaded for. So you would think, well, why wouldn't she have that? So I noticed that that symbol was intelligence with a capital I, but she had intelligence on the stone elsewhere with a lowercase I, with a totally different symbol. So I thought maybe it's like a double code, but she's speaking of God as like supreme intelligence, because why else would you have intelligence on the same sheet of paper twice, one with a capital and one without?
All right.
Send was absolute, and angels was absolute. Those are the absolute copies of it. So I translated that first line as, oh God, send angels, which again is in keeping with a lot of these curse stones.
Right.
So off to the right-hand side are just other random characters. I didn't put them all on there, but the circle with the line through it is the word so. The cross with the bar up high is support. The circle with a dot in the middle is will. The colon is and. The X is not. And she had Scotland on several of her. Of course, she was the Queen of Scotland, but she had that on several of her codexes as a squared off C. She also had Edinburgh on there with a different symbol, but I was running out of room on this slide to get them all on. But based on this, if I'm correct, the 90-foot stone talks about Edinburgh, Scotland. It talks about the master mason, or the grand master of the masons. It talks about these two guys, father and a son. It talks about a great treasure. There's a symbol for a great treasure. And when they were in Portugal and they saw that symbol with the cross on the bottom and the cross on that Alex found, that was a symbol for the great treasure.
Oh, wow.
So I figured I got to be on to something by now. So I went through, it took about a month of finding everything and trying to make sense out of it all. And I was feeding the information to Prometheus and to Rick and the team almost daily, and just consistently telling them what stage I was at and everything. And so, like I said earlier, I kind of look at Mary, Queen of Scots, as this turning point, because she actually granted my number one suspect is William Alexander. It's always talked about, and he's on slide 11 there. But the thing about him is that his family was granted it was former Templar property, and they were granted it by Mary, Queen of Scots. She also did some other granting of lands and titles based around the remnants of the Templars, and it's all, I have some of it in my books already. So it's kind of like that's when the era and the legend and everything of the Templar was dying down, and they were dissipating their land and belongings or whatever.
Right.
But William Alexander's sons were the first two known non-operative Masons, which is what became the Freemasons in history. And that's not just me saying that. They have the documents in Edinburgh to prove it, but it's on many Freemason sites and Freemason books. And they were born on that same Templar property. He was born on that Templar property, and they were born on that Templar property.
Right.
They Templar property because one of their ancestors fought with Robert de Bruce. It gets into a big deal there, but so they were carrying on this whole idea of secret societies and esoteric knowledge and all of that. And the third Freemason was his business partner in Nova Scotia. And all the first seven, and I found that all in a book. I was led to it by Kel Hancock, who is the he is, or was, the grand historian of the Grand Lodges of Nova Scotia.
Wow.
It was inadvertent because he told me about two other old books I should look at. While I was searching for them, I found this particular book. It told all about this treasure that was stolen. It told all about the first seven Freemasons. It had biographies of them and everything. So if you just go to the very next slide.
All right.
This document was written July 3rd, 1634, and this is the initiation of William Alexander's son, William Alexander Jr., who led the Scots in Nova Scotia from 1628 to 1632 when they had to leave. So the same guy that led the Scots in Nova Scotia was the world's first Freemason, and nobody can prove any other Freemason besides him. And so this document still exists, and I would love to go to Edinburgh, and whether the Masonic Lodge would let us in or not, I'd love to go and have them dig it out of their, it's probably in some frame or something, to preserve it, to actually see the document. But they had these for every one of the first seven. I'm sure they had them for many others, but for the first Freemasons, they had a document like this. And in the book where I found it, they also translated it into normal writing, but it was still in Old Scots, which is kind of like English, but not really. Anyway, so those guys were initiated as the first non-operative Masons under the guy whose name was found on the 90-foot stone. That he was the Grand Master of the stonemasons. He was also a good friend of William Alexander. He was on different committees with him. Alexander drew a map of Nova Scotia in 1624, and that guy's title, he was Earl of Arundel, his title's on that map. They were on a fishing council, which I believe was actually a spy agency. And here's the big kicker is Sir Francis Bacon died at that guy's house. So when I started seeing all this stuff, my head's just spinning. Is that this? All I could think of is full circle. Everything's going full circle right now.
Wow.
Circles too. But if you want to skip to the next slide, this actual guy, I think I'm going to just hold off naming names at the moment. But his name is on the stone twice. If you use the MQS. His family was totally connected to her. Incredible ways they were connected to Mary Queen of Scots.
Wow.
The guy who Bacon died in his home, he was the friend of Sir William Alexander. So maybe we could take the slides off for a second here, and I'll tell you a couple other little stories right now.
All right.
Anyway, that's what the book's about, and it expands on the Freemasons and the beginning of them, and on Kabbalism being a driving force. I have a complete chapter on Francis Bacon and how he gels into all these different angles and everything. And there's a lot of details, but I try to present it in a way that if you're a good reader, you can, it's complex, but it's not difficult. There's a difference. You're going to You're not going to be, beating yourself in the head. I can't understand this. I can't understand this. So you probably heard about the little snafu with the pricing of the book.
Yeah, I did.
For some reason, it came out on Amazon at $250, which I wouldn't even pay that for it. So
I was going to say, did you get any takers for that?
no, not
Wow.
that I know. They bought anybody out there bought one for $250. Send it back, get your money back, and then buy it for $21.95 or whatever the price is on it. But they fixed the price in Canada first, and I literally made 12 phone calls to them. I chatted with them. I sent emails. I got promise after promise, and one of the problems was it was over a weekend. Nobody works.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That
Oh, yeah.
blew a whole day right there.
Yep.
And so it got changed in Canada first. So right off the bat, as soon as it got changed in Canada, I got 3 book sales right off the bat. Well, one of those was a guy named Art Genis, and I hope he doesn't mind that I mention his name, because he sent me he had read half the book at that point, and he sent me this question. He said, I love your theory and all that. He said, but do you think there's any chance that Mary Queen of Scots got her symbolism from somewhere else, even if she assigned her own words to those symbols?
Right. Yep.
Thinking back to the church in Portugal and that symbol that means great treasure.
Right.
I wrote him back. I said, well, yeah, I mean, I guess she could. I mean, you get symbols from anywhere, but maybe she did. So that got me on the idea of another book that ties specifically, as much as I possibly can, with everything I found before and everything I'm finding out, ties the Templars to the Freemasons. And that was one driving force. But the other one is that I've been asked to, I've done a few Masonic lodges, talks, and I have to tell you, the first one I did, they said, don't talk about Oak Island, just talk about the Templars and the Freemasons. So I got done with that, and I said, well, are there any questions? I was there for another hour and a half answering. I wasn't even supposed to talk about it, but they were the ones asking the questions. But and in the meantime, I'd already started thinking about the Portugal connection, and we wanted to get out of the cold, so we decided to go down to Brazil, and that was another tough trip because of the COVID.
I imagine. Yeah.
That, but so I hooked up with this historian guide down there, Luis dos Santos, and he was just a gem of a guy. Spoke wonderful English. He was of Portuguese mixed descent, but essentially Portuguese. He spoke Portuguese. He spoke Spanish. He was telling us the difference between the two, and English and all that. And so he knew that one of my goals was to go to the museum there. One thing was because there's a coin, there's only 2 of them in the whole world. It was issued in Portugal, and it's got the Knights of Christ symbol on the back of it.
Wow.
One of them resides in this museum, and the other one was just found a few years ago in a shipwreck over by Africa, and it was in a clump of other coins. But somebody who studies coins found it and said, "Oh my God, we got only the second one in the whole world." So I wanted to see that coin, see what I could find about it, and I also wanted to learn about that Tumbaga gold, which is gold put together. And surprisingly, what I found out about that was that Brazil really didn't produce much gold at all. The Tumbaga was principally gold that was traded to the Spanish in like Chile and Peru, places like that. But they didn't start really mining in Brazil till I think like the late 1600s or something. But I also found there's this island there that was named in the 1500s for a guy that's been in my book a number of times already. That was kind of somebody that William Alexander looked up to, and he was French, and he actually is the man who took Mary Queen of Scots from Scotland down to France, and he had to circumvent the English that were waiting to capture her to get her down here. So he was a big Scottish hero, even though he was French. Well, he went down there about the same time the Portuguese did, and then he left and his troops got attacked by the Portuguese. But the island that he set up on is still named for him,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
used by the Brazilian Navy now. So it's been named that since the 1500s. It's just crazy how things will stay the same forever.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, but the funny part about it is that it's not terribly funny in the beginning, is that the museum had burnt a couple years ago, and so they were fixing it up, and the curators and the director and everybody was there, but they weren't open to the general public. But he thought he could get me in anyway, so we went down there. And if you go to the next slide, this one's kind of a funny one. I mean, in a way, it's funny. That'd be number 14.
Yep.
So here we are at that gate with an armed guard. And if you zoom down on his right-hand side, you'll see a nice big pistol.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So I'm standing there. I can't talk Portuguese or Brazilian, whatever. And Louise is just talking a mile a minute and to this guy, and the guy's talking back to him, and they're like semi-heated, like basically, we got to get in there. And the guard saying, you're not going to get in here.
Wow.
And God, shortly after this picture was taken, he put his hand on the hip of that revolver. I'm like, it's time to go, Louise.
Time to go.
Time to go. I don't need to see that. I saw a picture of it.
Not that important.
Yeah. So we left.
Wow.
But we got some really nice tours and a lot of history. He was just a fount of knowledge about the Portuguese and Brazil and all of that. So it was well worth the thing. So
it looks like he's wearing a bulletproof vest as well. So he's ready to go. I mean, this.
And he wasn't the guard. They had him stationed like every 20 or 30 feet.
Wow.
So I don't know. Brazil had the Olympics. They had the World Soccer thing, and the Pope visited 3 years in a row. So they really built up their economy and all their buildings and the ocean fronts and all that. And then boom, all of that dropped off, and then COVID hit. Yep. And so they had so much of their infrastructure built up now for nothing, kind of. So there's a lot of people walking around without jobs and all that. And so I think they don't want their museum to be, invaded because people are desperate or whatever. But anyway, so between that trip and already thinking about another book, even though I shouldn't be, and then getting this message from Art Genis, I thought, maybe, that, and then the fact that I'm going to do this talk in 2023, it's at a teaching lodge, Masonic teaching lodge, and they invite higher level Masons from a wide area, and they all come together at this lodge. And so you can't go in there and be a flunky. I mean, you got to go in there with the juice,
Exactly.
So I already knew I was going to have to step up my game to do that. And so everything just was coming together to think, maybe I will write one. So just for half a minute or so, you can put the next slide on here. This is what I think the cover's going to look like.
Wow. I was looking at this one earlier when you sent it to me, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is, a book number 9. But this has really got a lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah. And I've already found tons of stuff that I didn't even know. I had parts of it in my other books, but I kind of fleshed it out a little bit. And so basically just says Oak Island Knights Templar and Freemasonry. But it's going to be the connections between them and then how the legends of them connected to the Money Pit particularly. So, but that's may not be the final cover, because a lot of times I'll do a cover and then as I'm writing the book, I'll think, there's something more appropriate, but I just like that cover. And then of course, my latest book, Curses, Codes, and Secret Societies. And that one there. And that's the one that just came out.
Right.
And went through the trauma of a $250 price tag and all that. But like I say, I think I've gotten more people write me about that book than any book I've ever written. And one thing I do is I explain the nature of, or the origin of the Oak Island curse, where it came about.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah, go
modern.
ahead. Sorry.
Well, I can talk about it right now, but it was there was no mention of the curse in any old newspaper articles. There was a mention of a superstition about the island.
Mhm.
There was no mention of a curse in the Reader's Digest article, which you would have thought there would have been, because that's the
Exactly.
article that everybody going.
Mhm.
I remember reading that when it came out, and I used to read back then, and you probably remember it too. There was only 3 networks, plus you could maybe get
Yeah,
1 or 2 Canadian ones that were really fuzzy,
exactly. Yep.
and parents
Mhm.
controlled the knob anyway. So
Well, they had me I was the remote control and
yeah,
the guy running the rabbit ears. Yeah.
so you were, kids read books, and like Jack London and Alexander Dumas and Robert Louis Stevenson and all that. So I had a collection of those books, and so that Reader's Digest went in with that collection of those books, and I
Mhm.
think it was in there for like 3 years till I started growing up more or whatever, and I wished I would have kept the darn thing, because it was just like I don't know how many times I read that same article and dreamt
Yeah.
about treasure on an island. And when Charles took me down to see Nolan's Cross, we
Mhm.
just saw 2 of the rocks because it's very muddy in there. It was more than I bargained for, I'll tell you. But I was real happy to see him. But
Mhm.
we were leaving, and he was just smiling so big. And I said, "Boy, you're just like the happiest man in the world." And he said, "Well, why wouldn't I be? I hunt for treasure on an island every day of my life."
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
got, can I come here and do that? And then I'll be happy every day too. But um, so uh, it's been a wonderful experience with those guys. And 2 things that I always say is that, number one, there is no acting.
Yeah.
There's setups for arrivals and stuff, because they can't have 2 drones in the air and 2 guys standing on the causeway waiting for me to show up.
Right.
Know when I'm going to show up, or if I show up unexpectedly or whatever, they have to say, "Can you drive back across the causeway and come
Yep.
over so we can get the camera?" And the only time that I ever had to do that,
Mhm.
I really chuckled, because they gave me a walkie-talkie type of a thing, and they said, "You'll hear your cue to come over when we're all ready, when we get the drones up." So I could see
Right.
the drones in the air, but I was just around a little corner, and so all of a sudden I heard somebody say, "Action, James," and oh my God, I just burst out laughing, because I never thought I'd hear those words. I didn't know that's what they were going to say. So I drove across the causeway, and I could see I tried, they didn't tell me not to, but I tried not to look directly at the cameras, that would,
Right. Yeah.
but there were 2 guys on shore, and there was 2 drones in the air, and they had told me where to park. And so, and this is the other part of that story, is I've been filmed for 20 hours or more, and I was never once told what to say, ever.
Right.
I was told what not to say one time, and that was the time, because they told me to pull up by Rick's truck, and he'll come out and meet you. So I pulled up there. There are only 2 trucks, so I'm thinking there's only going to be like 4 or 5 people, or how many people are going to be there? They're rode together in a truck or whatever. So Rick comes out and greets me, and we walk through the door, and everybody was in there except like Dan wasn't in there, But I mean, just about
Yeah.
everybody. And it just shocked me so much that I said, "Wow, you brought the whole fam damnly." the, the producers there, because there's like 3 cameramen inside the war room. Uh, they said, "No, you can't say that.
Yeah.
Can you
Don't say that.
can you just walk out the door and walk back in and not say that?" I said, "All right." So that's the only time they coached me
That's
or anything.
hilarious.
And and if you think about it, if everybody was an actor, they'd have to have a staff of script writers, maybe 20, I don't know. And then when would people learn their lines? Because
Right.
they're out in the field working all day, and then they're going to go home and sit there and, okay, tomorrow I have to say this, 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 and this.
Mhm.
You so it's their deal originally was, we're going to do our search the way we want to do our search. You can film us, and you can present it how you want to present.
Exactly.
So in my case, I've been filmed, like I say, probably 20 hours or more, but I've only actually, if you count the number of minutes I've been on the screen, even though I've been on 12 times, it's 5 or maybe 10 minutes for those 12 shows. So there's a lot of me laying on the cutting room floor in Los Angeles. And I think that, they have different goals.
Yeah.
The Oak Island team wants to find a god darn treasure, or at least the story about it.
What, why, when, and where, at least. Yeah.
Prometheus wants to have a successful TV show.
Correct.
And I know they're emotionally invested in it. I know that for a fact, because conversations I've had, particularly emails with Prometheus,
right.
They're really invested too, but they still have to pay the bills in the end.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And so I do believe that sometimes things get lost in translation because they're being filmed there. Whoever this poor guy is that has to edit it, it might be getting a feed from 4 different cameras, that he's got to decipher which is the best feed to use.
Yep.
And he wasn't there at the meeting. And so he's got a synopsis of it that one of the people writes up. They show it to me every year, and I get to edit it. If I see where they understood something wrong or whatever.
Right.
But he's reading the synopsis, which is still can only be like I was in there for 4 hours one year. I only had a 1-hour presentation. They kept me in there for 4 hours.
Wow.
And how can a guy do unless you're really good at shorthand and then translating or whatever? So I think that maybe a little bit is lost there, and also their goals are different. So, that's not to make an excuse for them. It's just that people got to understand that this is a big, big undertaking. We see the very, very tip of the iceberg of Oak Island. Yeah. Not only in the way it's filmed and what you see in the war rooms, but what they're actually doing, because they find there's situations where they have to get permission for something, or they might catch hell for something that they talked about or did.
Yep.
That they don't want to make a big deal on a show about it, but they have to, behave themselves. And that's why you can see the frustration in Marty's face when he said, we did everything right. We tried to do everything right, And but I have to tell you, when we went up to New Rosk, and that was about that medallion on the Oak Island Knights book.
Yes. Yep.
1871. And Tim and Alessandra were up there waiting for us. And the cousin of the man that found that was there, because he was with them when he found it. They were just kids. And he knew right where they found it. He couldn't get his cousin to come to it. But so they had Rick and Doug and I rode up in one of those black trucks, and they had us parked down on the low road, and we had to walk up this hill. Well, this hill wasn't a terribly challenging hill. It was, it wasn't a straight walk for sure, but we get halfway up the hill and a semi truck comes down the road, just make all kinds of noise. So they're like, cut, go back down.
Go back.
So they had 2 drones in the air and 2 cameras filming us. And so we walked back up it. We just about get to the top when the same thing happens. And the drone operator said it totally ruined. He was near the road. He said, I've got nothing here usable, whatever. So, all right, we're sorry. Can you guys do it one more time? So by the time we came up that hill the 3rd time, it was a little bit of a challenge. But and then we got up there, and it was black fly season. And
I heard about that. Yeah.
Tim sprayed us all, trying to prevent problems, but the flies were just bugging everybody, and everybody was swatting in front of their face. And I'm
can't film like that either.
They're not going to be able to use this film, because how are they going to cut out where somebody doesn't have their hand in front of their face?
Right.
It turned out I got bit 9 times, and boy, they didn't go away for weeks. But we did. It ended well in the sense that we did talk the gentleman into bringing it to the war room. The only problem was it was a Saturday and the whole film crew was gone. I talked to John Levy on the phone, and he said, I'll never get a crew together. There's just no way. The only pictures, the only story about that exists, and the only real good photo And the only photos of that war room meeting are in my book, Oak Island Nights.
Yep.
So stuff like that happens, you know, and
Uh-oh. He froze. All right. Hopefully it's it looks like we lost James.
oh, am I
Oh,
back?
there you are. You're back. You froze there for a few minutes, or about 20 seconds on us. Sorry.
Well, let's hope that doesn't do that again. So uh, the satellite must have went behind the moon or something.
Yeah,
I don't.
exactly.
So uh, I don't. I forgot where I was after I froze. But anyway, uh, there are not actors or scripts, and it's a lot more complicated than any. Oh, I know. I was going to mention the bones, which uh,
Yes. Okay.
you know, found those two in H8. Well, they
Yes.
got people started making comments about, you know, digging up a grave type thing, you know, and I guess they just felt bad about it. You know, they didn't expect, you know, they expected for it to be welcomed, and it depends on who's doing the complaining too. And I don't know who did the complaining, but so they thought, well, you know what, we got to diminish talking about them a little bit, you know, even though it's a very significant find,
Oh,
finding
absolutely.
bones from two different people from two different nationalities,
Yeah.
however far they were down, 100 foot or whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, that here is enough proof. Anybody that says there isn't anything there,
Exactly.
just look at that, you know.
Yes. Exactly.
And so they just decided, well, we won't, you know, go down that path anymore. And so things happen. Samuel Ball, they waited 2 years to get that permit because I've gone and seen it from 200 foot away, and the guy told me we can't walk over there. We don't have the permit. And it was 2 years later before they finally got the permits to do what they did. So they're just struggling to get
Yeah.
permitting. They're struggling to keep everybody happy, you know, that might have some big negative thing to say. Now they've got the Mi'kmaq archaeology thing that they've got to do.
Yep.
And uh, and it's like the research, I kind of akin it to a spider web for everybody. It's a giant spider web. I'm just one little part of that spider web, and I can
Right.
barely that part of it
Yeah.
web together. Well, it's the same thing for them, getting third party drill units set up, dealing with labor issues, getting theorists lined up, getting the rooms, the flights, worrying about a hurricane coming across
Yeah.
the island.
Yeah. That too. Yeah. Exactly.
COVID, you know, threw them a big curve. Those
Mhm.
guys fighting. They fought a worldwide pandemic and a couple of hurricanes just in the last few years,
Yep.
let alone all these other things that we know of, you know. So to keep the ball rolling, there has to be just so much spirit uh,
Yeah.
in them. And you know what I've kind of noticed? I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but well, Rick looked a little maybe tired and frustrated towards the end of the season until he went to Portugal.
Yep.
But Marty seemed like he got a booster shot for interest in Oak Island, and he just seemed like, you know, by God, we're gonna go, you know.
Yep.
So anyway,
You know,
uh,
he really got a shot when he found the because he made a comment about that when they found that part of that gun,
oh
the flintlock. When they found that, he was pretty excited. He said, "I finally found something that I can show Rick. Hey, look what I found." You know, the big brother.
yeah,
So you know, he was pretty and that plus the stone road. You know that they were following up through Lot 15. He got very excited about that too. So you're right. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And you know, that's part of what you were just describing is exactly what, you know, I have talked about in the fact that, you know, this was kind of a this season, especially the last few episodes, the last several episodes was a little bit lackluster, but it was also showing us this is reality TV. You are seeing exactly what they're going through. You're seeing their frustrations, you're seeing their elation when they find something. So you're seeing this exactly what's taking place on the island right now, or you know, when they were filming, of course, and you're getting a true sense of what they go through. So we're frustrated because oh, they're finding more wood, but They put down another caisson. They ran into bedrock. They had to pull it back up and go try another one. We were disappointed, but so are they. Look at their faces, and that's you get a sense of just exactly what they're going through when you see that and you feel that with them.
And I think they experience it way more often than
Oh,
we do.
absolutely, absolutely.
Every single time that every hour Gary spent walking around aimlessly, or
Mhm.
you know, that thought this was here and that was there, and they weren't. And you know, speaking of the wood, because you know, there's always the jokes about finding more wood and all that.
Mhm. Yep.
Well, it is so significant because it can be dated, and
Yes.
uh, you can look at the metal and you can say, well, it's pre 1840 or it's pre 1700 or whatever, based on compounds in it, but you can't pinpoint it to a
Exactly.
time. But you can pinpoint the wood
Mhm.
pretty darn well, and you can do a bar chart of all the times. And they, on one of the episodes, they showed a number of things that fit my 1632 theory. You know, but there that phenomenon could happen for another time period too. So I'm not saying that I exclusively have the time period where everything fits, but I do have a lot
Right.
of things.
You're right.
And so every time they find it, it depends on where they find it, and you
Mhm.
know, the in situ situation of it. Because if it's
Right.
down, if it's axe cut and it's down about where the money pit was at 100 foot, and
Right.
it to the oldest date on that particular piece was 1626, I believe.
Yep.
That means something. I mean,
Yeah.
it absolutely means something. How did it get down there? Why was it axe cut? And why was it put down there so long ago?
Right.
So every time they find any kind of significant piece of wood, in fact, I've been saying to people they need to put a carbon dating lab right on the island. You know,
I
so
know. Wouldn't that be something? Yeah.
Charles, take that down and carbon date it right now. You know,
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't
they,
know what that process goes through, but like, and that was what, and they brought the CT scanner on there.
yeah,
They first started off with the XRF that you talked about that told them, found that the gold on the metal, and that
right.
if, they were looking at the combination of that gold with the copper and the silver in it, and coming up with Tumbaga gold being very similar in its percentages of gold, copper, and silver. So, yeah, if they were able to do something like that with the wood, I mean, the time it takes to get the results back. I
Yeah.
mean,
And the expenses. I mean, it's got to
and the
be.
expense, yeah.
Yeah, that second machine you were talking about, I saw that in operation. They had gotten
Oh,
it
did you?
not too much earlier than when I got there, and Rick was so excited about it.
Mhm.
And so they had, you know, that guy that was the guy that was. I'm sorry that I don't remember his name, but he was the one that was cleaning up the items they were finding. He was like a curator or whatever, dusting them up.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I can see him
Older,
standing there, but I can't think of his name. Linda will remember. She'll pop it up here for me.
well,
She
was in the room there, and there were actually three women in there. This is before the fiasco with the deciding to, you know, let the uh,
Sandy.
archaeologists go. But they were in there rebuilding different pieces of pottery and stuff. They were finding pieces and gluing together to try to find out what, you know, if they had enough pieces that matched, they were trying to figure out what that item was originally. So they had three people at a table doing that. And then this other gentleman was in there reading pieces of metal and stuff. And I imagine they read like every piece of metal they ever found, you know, to get compositions. But anyway, Rick showed it to me, and it is so cool because it does a 10-second test and a 30-second test. And then it puts the comparisons of those two tests. They're
Okay.
method, different methodology to each test. But then it puts the findings side by side,
Mhm.
and usually the same exact number. Sometimes they vary a little bit. But what's happening is it's literally getting two tests at one time. It's not just the one test. And so
Wow.
that doubles the effectiveness of it, you
Yeah,
know.
I didn't know they did that. That's cool.
Yeah. And but that CT scanner that wasn't there yet. But speaking of that musket, so as soon as I saw that, I know there was talk about it might be Portuguese or they were popular from the 1500s up. Well, the first actual musket or flintlock ever built was built in 1630, which was just 2 years before my 1632 date. And
Wow.
you can write online. My guess on that is that it was probably not a depositor. It was probably one of the farmers or the searchers or somebody. But the biggest question about it is, where's the barrel? I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
you know, if
I
you're
brought
gonna,
that up on the show when we talked about it. I said, "Where's the other parts of it? There should be a barrel there somewhere."
yeah, if your gun breaks for some reason, maybe exploded or whatever,
Mhm.
why are you going to leave part of it there and take the rest of it home? You're going to either
Right.
leave it, take it all home, and try to fix the darn thing. And
Exactly.
they found two more pieces like that over where William Phipps was born in New Brunswick, and the gentleman that's working with that team contacted me and Doug and another person, can't remember the third person, and wanted to know if there was some way that they could work with them to, see if they match, or what the comparisons are. And I just deferred to Doug. I said I'm not that intimately involved with the show, and Doug's the man.
Right.
I just backed out of the email. First of all, I get so many emails, and everybody's got a theory.
Mhm.
And the Oak Island team was actually sending me theories they were getting to vet, and you can only
Other
do so
people are.
much on it unless you want to spend hours and hours and hours researching that angle. If there's an ounce of believability, then you look into it further. But I've had, I want to say, about 6 guys that are writing books that have shared parts of their books with me and have asked me questions that might help them out. And 3 of those people, one was an intelligence analyst, one was a policeman in detective in England, and the other one was he was an investigator in the army, in the military. I don't know what branch, but he was in Afghanistan, and
Right.
did forensic investigations for them there. And so these are like people that I feel like a peon when I'm emailing these guys, because they're you know
Yeah.
and uh, uh, one of them had a lead about when Cornwallis came over to found Halifax. That wasn't his real destination, and he defied what his orders were. And before he went to Halifax, which wasn't called that at the time,
Right.
that was 1749, he
Mhm.
went to Mahone Bay. And by looking at the compass readings that were in the logbook and looking at the depth chart readings of where they parked the boat, they were just off the coast of Oak Island.
Wow.
And there's no other place in Mahone Bay where it's that same depth reading.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but he had he wanted to focus on
Interesting.
that. My focus is a little bit different, but we shared a million emails about it.
Mhm.
But the latest one was this David Neeson, and he found a grove of trees just like the ones on Isaac's Point that are on
Oh,
and
it is.
in Scotland.
Really?
And he's writing a book about the flora and fauna and geology of Oak Island, and how modern science can, what it can deduce from
Mhm.
that. And he's working with other people. It's not just him alone. And one of the people he's working with was a botanist in Scotland that lived not too far from those trees. They're on an island up on the northwest, actually right off the island where my family came from. And they they look just like it. And I took a photo of the Isaac Point trees where there was one group of 2 or 3 trees missing, and I
Mhm.
took his photo and I put it in there, and you couldn't tell the difference. And
Wow.
in my book, you can't tell that. I had to put an arrow on it because I knew nobody would know which one I'm talking about.
Now was this the umbrella oaks, the real tall?
Yeah. And
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Yep.
so this botanist uh, talked about what he thought they were, but the most interesting thing about it, which this David Neeson didn't even know at the time,
Mhm.
was that this guy said that kind of tree was brought to Scotland from France by Mary Queen of Scots' entourage.
Really?
He personally planted a tree, one of those trees, at one of the older sites of Scottish royalty, and that thing didn't die until I think it was 1945.
Wow.
And the trees on Oak Island all died. They were almost gone by about 1935, and then somebody wrote about them again in 1945. Said there were just a couple of them left, and then I think in 1957 somebody wrote that they were gone. So
Yep.
it was almost the same time zone. He didn't even know I was writing about Mary Queen of Scots when he sent me that, and I couldn't break the news. You know, I NDA and everything else going on. I didn't want to break that, but I eventually did. When I inserted that part in my book, I sent it to him so he could realize some of the significance. But before he ever even knew about me or my 1632 book or anything, they had estimated those trees were planted based on their lifespan, were planted between 1622 and 1752, based on the lifespan of those trees. So I can't wait for his book to come out, because there's one I'm going to get and read. You know, if he's explored every other detail as much as he's explored those trees, there should be great stuff in there. And I don't know if you know, the Oak Island team hired a couple botanists to look at the records of what was found when they found the money pit, the descriptions of it.
Right.
And they also came up with a date in the 1600s, because based on what the saplings that had been growing, and they just did an analysis of all the information there was, and they came that same time period too. So they weren't you know, there's a book right there. I think I told this guy about it, David Neeson. I think I told him, you better look into that, because there might be some more fodder for your book. But so there's lots of theories, and it's not my job to prove everybody else's theory. I believe in mine. I'm saying it's absolute, but I'm saying it's a very likely scenario, and I'm doing my job, taking care of my little part of the spider web. And somebody else can do the Portugal part of the spider web, and somebody else can do whatever, you know, and that's their job. And it's kind of like, I think of it as like when you go into a law case and there's a prosecuting lawyer and a defense lawyer. Well, their job isn't to be the judge or the jury.
Right.
The defense is supposed to get the guy off, and the prosecutor's supposed to prosecute him, and that's all they. So I'm just one of those lawyers, prove the, you know, but so anyway, I have so much fun doing it. I have fun coming on shows like this, and I do live talks too. I just did one a couple of weeks ago, and I got one coming up in about 2 weeks. And basically, I just make like a slideshow, kind of like what I gave to you,
right?
And I tell my story, and people are just fascinated by it, and they
absolutely
ask really good questions too. You know.
Yeah.
Like, so,
well, speaking of that, we have a couple too that people presented. Elaine asked this question. She said, do you think that there is more treasure buried on Oak Island in addition to the Money Pit site? There's been the multiple treasures, multiple people using Oak Island theory over the years. So I think that's where Elaine is going with this. Do you think there's more than just, what may be in the Money Pit?
Well, another somewhat complex answer, but Rick asked me that same question. He said, "What if you were in charge of all of this? Where would you dig?" I said, "At the Money Pit," because that started this whole thing off. And you only have to find a couple clues. You don't have to find the whole cache. If you find dated coins out there, or whatever you could find, who knows? Because we've been surprised like crazy already.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I would want to focus there, but I absolutely know that a shipwreck near the island. I talked to the sea captain that dove on it back in the 70s.
Oh, really?
He pulled up coins, and he pulled up the interesting thing he pulled up was silverware that had a stag emblem on it, like a Highland stag. Well, my other main culprit that was the partner to William Alexander, that was their family symbol, since they know from at least 1309, because they have a wax seal and the little gizmo that made the wax seals. They have those from. So when he told me that, I'm like, he didn't know about my theory, but when he told me, yeah, well, we pulled up 7 forks and a serving spoon or something, they had this stag on the thing. I'm like, you're kidding us. You know?
Yeah. You had
So,
told me a little bit about that before. Yeah, that's very, very telling right there, isn't it?
and there were cannon on it and all that.
Mhm.
So, and the problem with those shipwrecks, I mean, we absolutely know that was there. And then they were looking at another one that they thought might be a shipwreck, with that diver that they brought in, that he's well taught too. I mean, he's forever too. I
Mhm.
can't think of his name. You probably know who I'm talking about, but
Actually, he's going to be on the show. We're going to have him on the show on, you must be referring to Dr. Lee Spence.
yep.
Yeah, he's going to be on Saturday at 2:00. So you'll have to tune in.
You know, I was thinking he ought to talk to this Robert McKinnon, because their lives seem to parallel each other.
I'm going to write that down.
He dove for the government. He dove for anything that he could make money diving. And somebody told him about they found this wreck. It was only in 30 foot of water, and they saw it, and it was clear enough. And they didn't want to spill the beans, because he told me treasure hunters don't tell their secrets or they won't get them.
Yeah.
So
Don't we know that?
he went there with this guy, and he dove on it, and he saw all the stuff, and he went to the underwater archaeologist that Mel Fisher used, and that guy dated the ship around 1600, and he said it's about 50-50 chance it's either British or Spanish based on the cannons. But anyway, so it's the man's name is Robert McKinnon, Captain Robert McKinnon. He's a successful treasure hunter. He's involved in $1 million operations that didn't work, and in $1 million operations that did work. You know, so he's no joke, to say the least.
Got that written down because I want to talk to Lee Spence, Dr. Lee Spence, about that. And that's so funny that you brought that up, because yeah, he's going to be on the show 2:00 this Saturday, and just day after tomorrow.
Do I remember that he was from Ontario or not?
I don't remember now. I don't honestly. I got my paperwork on. I was preparing to have you on, and I have my notes and stuff on him right over here, laying here somewhere in one of the piles. But yeah, I believe
Well,
so.
if he
Jan
is,
would know.
and Captain McKinnon is just up in Nova Scotia, you can fly from Toronto to Nova Scotia in about an hour, just a hair over an hour. You know, so I mean, they could get together real quick and share notes.
Absolutely.
He was so funny because he was so salty. Oh my God. And the night before I was going to meet with him, Rick set the meeting up, and Doug met me at the hotel and said, he's a very salty person. So if it bothers you, just close out the meeting. And he'd dominate the conversation, and he wouldn't tell us where the treasure was. So I'm in this 2-hour meeting with him, and about halfway through, he goes, "You're probably tired of hearing from me. I like to dominate conversation, whatever." I said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "For the rest of the day and listen to you." He had such a sailor's way about him and the stories he's telling. But he wouldn't tell me where the treasure was. That's when I wondered if Rick thought maybe I could weasel out of him something.
Maybe it might have been his motive there.
I said, "Well, where is this shipwreck?" And he said, "I'm not going to tell you." He said, "Treasure hunters don't tell where the treasure is. They won't get it." So that was 2019, I believe. Yeah. And then at the end of 2020, and I've surmised maybe the reason for it might have something to do with COVID, but he sent me an email and told me where it was. And not the actual GPS location.
I was going to say,
yeah, but
general
it's
location.
Near the mouth, so many feet out from the mouth of a certain stream. And that was his landmark. So I sat on that for a few months because I thought, well, maybe he wanted somebody else in the world to know where it was, just in case.
Yeah.
I was chosen that person, but I'm not sure that I want to be the man that has to take that to my grave too. So I thought, well, I'm not going to tell everybody, but I'm going to tell Rick, and I'm going to let him make the decision of where they go. So I told him, I said, I'm a little bit nervous about passing this on because I'm not sure what Captain McKinnon's intentions were, but
Right.
I
Exactly.
don't be the only man that knows this. And since you're the kingpin, I just assume you knew it, and then I can forget about taking any responsibility for it. But anyway, did you have more questions? We're getting close.
Yeah, I was just going to comment too that yeah, Dr. Spence is down in South Carolina. He was born. It looks like he was born in Ontario. And
Oh,
again,
okay.
I've got my notes. Oh, here it is.
I just thought
Uh,
if they were close, they could.
yeah, we're getting close on time here, so we're going to wrap it up here pretty quickly. But yeah, I believe he was born in Ontario, but he lives in South Carolina now. So, um, but yeah, so another one of the questions was, and I think this might relate to your books. Janet asked the question. It says, James, which of your books would you recommend for an introduction into the mystery of Oak Island? So
Uh,
to get somebody started as an introduction into this.
as an introduction to Oak Island, just generally speaking, that would probably be my very first book. But I didn't have
Okay.
my theory. I just looked at Glooskap and
Hmm.
Zichmini and the Templars and all that. Uh, I first got onto my theory in Oak Island 1632, but it was finding that Freemasons book and the treasure and the first Freemasons and all that. That came about with Oak Island Nights, and so that's a very good book. And Endgame was kind of like the icing on the cake of that. There were a lot of loose ends, especially after going up and talking to the team about it. And I thought, gee, I wish I would have got that in that book. And then, but my last two are just, uh, they're amazing me because of the detail in them. And one of my fans, because a lot of people buy all my books, and even when I'm at a talk, they've been there, they were there last year. They have the first six. Now they want to get the seventh, to have the list of them. But one of those avid fans wrote and said that this last one was the best book I ever wrote. And
Hmm.
again, it's the one that I've gotten the most back from. But I don't know. Throw them up in the air and grab one of them and start reading.
Exactly.
But I would start maybe with Oak Island Nights because I go into a lot of detail on my theory there.
Hmm.
And definitely the last two, because I discovered some really amazing things, and I had a lot of help. That's the thing. I had um, uh, just a lot of help. People want to help. They want to be part of the search too, and
Yeah.
they send me something that I can double check two or three other places or whatever. I'm going to insert it in the book somewhere. You know,
Hmm.
any other
Absolutely.
there?
Nope, that was it for there. Oh, and I misspoke. I said, yeah, he was my notes was saying that I thought was that he was born in Ontario, but no, he was born in Germany. So,
Oh,
but lives in South Carolina. So,
I
but
might have
yeah,
been.
go
I
ahead.
might be thinking about another diver that
Hmm.
has dove in Lake Erie that I saw that he lived in Ontario. I was thinking about going to visit him up there and tell him my stories and see what he thought and see if he wanted to go to the Oak Island team. But I just want to say about your show, I'm always amazed at the guests you get. I mean, I feel like uh, team 3 or 4, but I mean, when you get
Oh,
people
not at all.
Laird, Niven, and Carmen, I mean, Laird's one of the most amazing because he's right there and he's doing everything official and all that. But
Right. Yep.
um, I know that Doug told me right out he's never done an interview, and he's I think he talks well. I mean, I
Yeah.
spent a
Oh,
lot. I think he's concerned that he knows so darn much that he's going to trip himself up somehow. I mean, I get concerned about what I know, and I
yeah.
know a smidgen compared to what he knows.
Yeah. For
That
sure.
might be the reason. And when I did that little free newsletter uh, last summer, I only put out 5 issues just to keep everybody from going nuts till the show came back on. But
Yep.
interview with Laird, and I had one with Scott, and I had one with I can't remember who else. Oh, Carmen.
Hmm.
But I that's when I talked to Doug, because I've worked a lot with him, and he just said, I just have never done one. He said, I'm just concerned about what I might say. So then when I went there last summer, he said, we got to do that interview. And I said, yeah, but I'm already done with my issues. I just wanted to fill the gap there for a little while,
Right.
till till the season. So, but
Yeah.
anyway,
We would love to have Doug on. We really would, and we completely understand. And we have an open invitation with Doug and Charles and several of the guys that have not been on the show. But you're right. When you talk about some people like Laird, Laird has an enormous weight on his shoulders. That man. Well, they all do. They truly all do. But Laird, it's funny because you see him on the show, and he's pretty quiet. And people
oh,
talk about him. Oh, he's the buster of dreams, because they'll find something and they get all excited about it, and he'll look at it and go, "Yeah, that's a rock," or the lipstick case, or something like that. And he'll blow them out. But when we had him on, he was just on here a couple of Saturdays ago, and he was fantastic. I mean, the man has so much responsibility and so much to talk about, and not only that, but he wants to get back on the ball property. He that was his baby, was the ball property, and going through that, because that kind of work fascinates him, and being able to, he has a different approach. Like a researcher is going to research all this different material to try to come up with a scenario as to what took place on the island, right? So Laird takes a look at the actual things that he finds, the artifacts, and
and work.
lets those, right, exactly, and lets those tell the story of where it goes. So and if you ask him, well, what's your theory on this? No, what does the artifacts tell me? And that's what
Yeah.
he said, are you a treasure hunter? No, I'm not a treasure hunter. I look for artifacts and I put together a story based upon those artifacts. So, but he truly does have so much, weight on his shoulders, but, and again, some of the people that, we'd love to have Rick and Marty on, but again, Rick and Marty, they don't go on these kind of shows. They don't do that, and we completely understand that. So for those guys, someday we'd hopefully to get them on. Steve Guptill's been on, of course, and we had Dr. Ian Spooner on, who was fantastic. He was on just a couple Saturdays ago as well, and just again a fantastic load of information, and a wonderful guy. I mean, he was a lot of fun. But no, don't sell yourself short, Jim, because you have done so much research. I consider you an A-lister when it comes to being on, and being part of what's going on Oak Island, because of
Well,
all the research you've done. It's phenomenal. It absolutely is.
and where Laird might take a bowl and investigate it, I take a document and
Mm.
investigate it. And like
Exactly.
that treasure list that I first published in the Nights, I
Mhm.
wasn't. I'd only find it in one book. I
Yep.
found it in that Mason's book. I found it in the Privy Council minutes of the King, and I found it in a court case.
Mhm.
That told me this thing's real, because nowadays you might have people learning about it on the internet and faking something or whatever, but back then those were three disparate
Yep.
things. Freemasons weren't, whatever. So I try to, double or triple prove most of the documents before
You
I'll.
have to.
And if I can't, I'll say, I'll use a lot of qualifiers, which a lot of people don't like them. But I mean, if
You
you
have
can't 100%, and who can say 100% almost about anything 400 years?
exactly.
I
Yep.
mean, we can't say it about 4 years ago or whatever. So I use like probablys and maybe, and perhaps this was, and whatever, because how else can I tell the story?
Exactly.
But yeah, well, thank you for that. And um, I look up to those guys so much. I met them all. I didn't never met Fred or Dan. I felt bad about that.
Yeah.
The two times there when Dan was still alive, he was too sick to come out.
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
didn't get to meet him, but everybody is in real life just as you see him on the show.
Yep.
And been my experience of being there on 12 or 15 days. Gary's a little bit crazier than that on TV. He's
Yeah.
made some pretty
Yeah,
wise,
we've
wise.
we've heard that quite a bit about Gary, but and that is truly something that I think it is part of what has drawn everyone into the Curse of Oak Island TV show. Part of it. We all want to, and I've said this before, we all would love to see them bring up the treasure, some kind of treasure, out of there. But many of us, most of us, really want the facts. We want to know the who, what, why, when, and where. But when you watch the TV show, and we've watched it for now 9 seasons, now going into 10 seasons, we feel like we know these guys, Rick and Marty and the whole team, and you have the sense that they are men, or I should say people, because we include more into this now, Judy and the ladies that were the archaeologists that were working on it, Liz and Miriam and them, but people of integrity.
Yeah.
So I've talked to people to say, oh, they're, oh, them guys, they plant stuff and they go to, no, that I would never, ever believe that they would plant anything. And that what you see is what you get with the TV show and with them. And so that makes it more real for everyone. I think the fact that they are people of integrity.
And back when Rick's probably called me 3 dozen times, maybe. But the first time he called me, I was sitting down, fell over, thought I better sit down on the second chair somewhere. But I said, you know what has appealed to me about this show? It's just like I called up my buddies and said, throw your chainsaw and your shovel in the pickup and tell Billy to get that backhoe because we're going to go out and figure this thing out.
Yep.
And that's exactly what it is for us. It's exactly we're he didn't say we're the boys with the big toys, but I mean, he was saying we want to go have an adventure and use modern technology and modern equipment and whatever and try to solve the darn thing. But
exactly.
So anyway, they're good people, and they have to make the decisions that they have to make, whether they're particularly the decisions I would make or not.
Yeah,
do that. That's their job, just like I have my job. And I guess I'm not going to quit doing it because I've started up to page 42 or something in this new book.
Yep.
And I've been uncovering some good stuff. And one thing I like to try to do is present the information in a linear fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people write very creatively,
Mm-hmm.
but your paragraph and has nothing to do with the very next paragraph, like what I can't. So I try to tell the story more or less from the beginning, and that's why I talked about the curse, and then I talked about the proof of the stone, and going through it like that in this latest book. But that's just the way I am. I'm very linear about everything I do, and so and you need people of both kinds, because the people that are not linear and are just creative and bounce around, they a lot of times come up with ideas that you never thought of because they
absolutely that's absolutely true
path. And so I love to hear those opinions too, and think, well, how does that fit mine and whatever. So I can't take 100% credit because I've had so many people jump in the fray here, including my friend Doc Hamels, the Freemason. He doesn't tell me any Freemason secrets. I got to say that, but
none of them do.
He'll say, I was looking at what you wrote there, and did you ever imagine that such and such? And I'm like, God darn it, why didn't I think of that? And then I'll say, well, I'm going to look into it. Believe me, I'm going to look into it. So a lot of people helped out, but I guess I'm the guy that drove the bus, and not at the final destination yet. But I was thinking a 9th book would be appropriate, though, because there were 9 Templars and there were 9 levels to Money Pit, and the 9 kind of comes up a lot in Freemasonry and Knights Templar and all that. So, and Oak Island.
Yep.
So maybe a number 9 will be the absolute magic one, and
maybe.
I just can't imagine sitting back on my haunches, though. I mean,
see, that's it. Yeah.
So much out there.
There's too much to tell, and you have, and like you said, there's too much to talk about and put this all together. And what I like about your books is that they're an easy read and easy to understand. You put it out in such a way that it's easy for someone like me to read and understand where you're going. Just like you had just mentioned, I can read it and I can put it together and completely understand where you're going and what you're putting across. And that I think is the best part of it. For me to understand and get the meaning and the gist of what you're putting out there and the information.
And
So don't forget. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I learned the theory of the segue between paragraphs from my
Mhm.
proof, because they'd say, "What the heck is this paragraph have to do with that paragraph?"
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, maybe there's a sentence missing between those two. The connective tissue.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
use that word now, connective tissue, because I used it on the show and I use it on the news and everything else. Now,
Mhm.
there's always a thing of the day, like low hanging fruit was the big thing for a while,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and oh, or yes, no, look. I mean,
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
every start your sentence out with that, like what? It doesn't even mean anything. It's just a bunch of words. Still, I guess you get your thoughts collected, but. So I always like those kind of the word of the day things, and now it seems to be connective tissue, and
Connective tissue. Yeah, that's good. I like that though.
yeah, but it is what it is. I mean, you're connecting this dot to that dot to this dot to that dot, and
Mhm.
hopefully in the end you're going to come up with a. You know what I used to like to do? I thought about this the other day. Is those, the connect the dot things when I was a kid in books. I could tell what it was supposed to be, so I would try to connect the dots in a different way to try
And
to
see,
come up with a
come
different
up
picture.
with some.
I can remember doing that, and I thought about it again when Rick said that on that one show about me connecting the dots. I thought, oh my God, I can remember doing that. And of course, my mom was telling me, Jimmy, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. And like, well, yeah, but there might be something here. So
Yeah, exactly.
thanks for having me on. I know we're just about
Yeah,
time to
we're
go,
at 2 hours. Yep,
but
it's flown
I,
by.
I, I always want to recommend the very last book I wrote because I'm just so excited about
Mhm.
that one, and so like I said, throw them up in the air and grab one and start reading, and
Yep.
maybe you'll want to read more. Maybe you'll think I'm a crackpot. Who
Oh
knows?
no, I don't believe so. But I'm going to put the book picture up here one more time. This is the latest one. This is number 8. Oak Island Curses, Codes, and Secret Societies, folks, and it is available on Amazon. You
Yep.
can go out to Amazon. We do have it linked in the description below. You can find the book there, and I think it's running about 21 bucks or so, 21,
Yeah.
$22. But a great, I haven't got it. I was going to say a great read. I haven't read it yet, but I've already talked to several people who have, Linda included, who said it is a very good read and lots of great information. And Jim, I know that when you get down to this, you said, oh yeah, so 9 might be the lucky number. I think that even once you have solved, and I'm saying you have solved this whole mystery, there's still going to be more outliers. I think there's going to be more stuff to get to put together. That and I talk about them, even if they found the treasure tomorrow, there's still going to be lots of research to be done.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not the end story. That's not the end of it. They found some treasure, great, okay, but now it's going to bleed over to all this other information as to why was it there and who brought. It's not going to end. It really isn't. And could
Yeah.
we
Rick called
possibly be changing history of North America?
and Rick called me in January and said, "I believe the answer is in the research."
Yep.
Yeah. And he said that on that show, that very last
Yeah.
show.
Yes, he did.
Um, because, and again, it's exactly like what you said. If you pulled up a trunk of jewels tomorrow, who the heck put them down there?
Exactly.
Gotta
Exactly.
figure, and
Yep.
I love doing it. And it's one of them things where I lose track of time. So they always say if you lose track of time with what you're doing, you must love doing that. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm up here like at 7 or something at night, and next thing you know, it's 3 in the morning. I'm like, I can't believe that. You know, all over my computer screen, and I'm trying to categorize them, whatever. Anyway, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Hello to
Absolutely.
everybody, all my readers, and um, I appreciate it, and I appreciate all the nice comments.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on here today. We're going to have you back especially when you get on. You're going to be on Oak Island some more. We just know that. And when you get book number 9 done, we got to have you back on and talk about that some more. So thank you so very, very much for being on the show here with us today. And folks, like I said, you can go back and you can go out and get this book and get the other ones too. Don't just stop there. I've only got 2. This one's on the way, and then I'm gonna have to go back and look at some of the other ones and get the other books that he has now, a total of 8. So check those out on Amazon and get those going. And you will get, like he said, pick any of them, and it's going to give you some information that you did not have before about Oak Island and who could possibly have been there. So check that out. All right. So thank you again. Jim, for coming on the show. And thank you, folks, for tuning in with us here tonight. We really appreciate it. And don't forget, as we talked about a few minutes ago, Dr. Lee Spence will be with us on this Saturday at 2 o'clock. We're going to be with him. And we have a special guest co-host, Jan Anderson. I'm going ahead and I'm putting it out there right now. Jan's going to make her co-hosting debut with me with Dr. Lee Spence. She has been talking to him quite a bit. So you guys will want to tune in for that 2 o'clock on Saturday. All right. Again, thank you for being here, and you guys have a great rest of your week. We will see you here Saturday. All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.